you ever heard of Forró? Neither have I until recently. Apparently, Forró is a Brazilian partner dance that blends some of the techniques of the tango embrace with some of the energy and dynamic of salsa, creating something entirely its own. Now, every partner dance really is a response to three things. You have the music, you have the limited amount of space, typically, and then you have people who are negotiating for that space altogether. Forró and tango both came from African rhythms and European harmonies. Both evolved in crowded dance floors and both rely on connection. But the social rules and the unwritten contracts between dancers, those are completely different. In this conversation, Rafael and I break down forró, a dance that's loose where tango is structured, spontaneous where tango is very precise. We talk about floor craft, or really lack thereof, invitation rituals, and how different dance cultures decide who gets to dance and who doesn't. Now, after you hear the episode, I'm curious what you think makes a dance community welcoming to newcomers and beginners. Would love to hear your thoughts. You can drop them in the comments below the episode or send me a direct message on social at I'm So Tango. And now, enjoy. With me today on the banter for the very first time, we have Rafael Piccolotto. Is that close enough?
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. It's in fact. And you see, you have like two accents that going on here: a Portuguese accent for Rafael and an Italian for Piccolotto.
That's quite a mix. That's quite a mix. So, welcome to the show. It's so nice to connect with you and learn a little bit about this very mysterious dance to me. I don't think I've heard much about this dance before we started chatting. Fajo, I think I've seen it spelled and I've always thought, oh, it's faro or something.
Mhm.
Like a grain or a bean that you eat or something. Like that's the question. So I thought we would start our conversation with giving our listeners a little bit of a primer of what this dance is and maybe some of the history of it that we should know.
Wonderful, wonderful. Very happy to be talking to you. I found your channel on YouTube and say like that's so interesting. We need to get in contact. I'm so happy we are making this happen. So, introduction to forró. Forró is a Brazilian style, a Brazilian dance, and a Brazilian rhythm. So people say that is a word that's used for different things. The genre is from the northeast of Brazil, and usually is played mostly during a certain time of the year. They have specific times, usually are the June parties, festas juninas, parties from June, and they have this very specific instrumentation, which is not used in any other style. We have the accordion, which has a similarity to tango, the similar sonority. But then we have two percussion instruments that are very unusual. One is the triangle, like the classical triangle, but instead of, as we use in classical music, just to punctuate little things here and there, the triangle is the instruments that rides all the subdivisions of the tingelingy, 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 tingelingy. And then we have a bass drum, which is somehow similar to what you see in a marching band, also similar to what you see in Bulgarian music. In Bulgarian music would be a tapan, which is like a bass drum, like round like this, kind of thin. And in one side you have like a large stick, and another side you have a very thin stick. So you have the sound of the dong, 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 dong in one side, and the other side you have a little stick though, chack, 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 chack. So you have the percussion, tingelingy, tingelingy, dingy, dum, 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 and the accordion giving the harmony on top. So it's a very specific and very different instrumentation compared to any other style. So this
Wow.
is the music.
When did this tradition of this music start? Like what
It's
years are we
younger than
talking?
tango. It's younger than tango. I would say Forró, as we know now, there is one figure, one artist. His name is Luis Gonzaga, and he's called the father of Baião, like the king of Baião, which is one of the beats of Forró. And he's a figure who uh, got Forró known Brazil, entire Brazil, because it was a very regional thing before, and then you got entire Brazil hearing, listening to Forró. And this was in the mid of last century. So
Gotcha.
40s, 50s,
Wow.
60s. So like during the golden age of radio transitioning to TV. So this is the time where the style originated.
Is it known like why this style emerged?
I don't know exactly the origins. The overall structure of the origins is very similar to other styles in Brazil. One of the most well known is samba, which is from Rio de Janeiro. Very many people associate to Brazilian music, carnival, and all that. The
That's
origins of
literally
that
all
is
I know about Brazilian
uh,
dance is
most
samba.
people. It's most people. It's what most people know. You're a very good representation of most people. What most people know outside of Brazil,
Exactly.
and even inside of Brazil, forró is most people know what it is, but it's not as popular or as well known as samba, for example. But if you look at samba, you have rhythms who are influenced and have origins from Africa, and then you have
Hmm.
harmonies and other elements in instruments, musical instruments coming from Europe. This in samba, in forró is the same. You have an instrument, accordion, which is an European instrument, but then you
Right.
have
Right.
rhythms who are highly syncopated and is a kind of beat that is not common to European music. European music tends to be a little bit more on the ground. A little bit, I would say, it's hard to use the term square, but it's a little bit more grounded here. If you take African rhythms or African Brazilian rhythms, you have a lot of syncopation like tak chikat chiki tak chikat chiki tak chikat chiki tak, or samba tak 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 chikat kat kat kadigu tak 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 chikat kat kat kadigu dik kadigu dik, which is very like not so symmetric
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
gives this little different flavor. So we have this rhythm flavor coming, this influence from Africa, and the instrument, the harmony coming from Europe, and that's how it started.
I know that this is the beginnings of tango as well. Like when you read of how tango started, it's the same origin where you have the African rhythms combined with the harmonies of European music. And it continues to fascinate me how much music has evolved from these kinds of combinations. So that's very
And
interesting.
in different ways.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
if we look what happened in samba is one thing, what happened in forró is a different thing, what happened
Hmm.
in tango is a different thing. If we happen in salsa and other rhythms from Central America is a different thing. What happened in jazz and New Orleans and swing is a different
Right.
thing. But they all came from the same origins of rhythms and a tradition from Africa combined with harmony in instruments from Europe. The music was before the dance. So in the beginnings, the music was a very much a peasant music. It was even in Brazil at the time looked down a little bit. Like, oh,
Really?
this is the music from very simple people who doesn't have much culture, and through time it changed, but the origins were very simple. So like uh, community gatherings, people playing and singing about how like the challenges of the time. The lyrics are talking about people who are moving from a rural area trying to get a better life in the cities. Talking about how it was dry the environment and how it was hard to harvest things. So this was the original themes of Forró, and the dances were a community dance, and it was very simple. It was just people like getting together and like shaking their body to the rhythm and then stepping to one side and stepping to the other side and then turning a little bit, stepping to one side. It was a very simple dance without turns, without walks, without all the complexity that you would maybe see at the time in other styles, even in Brazil, and very different from what we dance today. So the forró that you see in events in the US, in Europe, or in Brazil that is danced today is very different from the forró people used to dance 50 years ago.
So I don't have a visual image of Forró in my mind. So if we could think about what does Forró look like, what would be the closest partner dance?
I usually say to people who have no idea what's forró, especially outside of Brazil, I say, imagine tango, imagine salsa. They had an affair and the kid was raised in Brazil.
That's fantastic. I
Because
love that.
because when we look tango, my impression and my understanding of tango is a dance that mostly dance together.
Hmm.
It's a lot of body to body, a lot of embrace. And when you look to salsa, most of it is turns. And it's like, I'm doing my shines here, you're doing your shines there, and you're doing things together. For we kind of merge the two things in a way that we dance part of the dance very much close together. And we even borrow some influences from tango, doing sacadas and other movements. But we also have moments in the dance that we open to open position and then we do turns. But if you look at the way we dance close together is not like, is a little bit different than tango. And the way
Gotcha.
we dance in open position is not quite like
Salsa.
salsa. And I used to say that, why I say raised in Brazil, because Brazilian people tend to be very warm and together and connected and very touchy and very cozy. So
Right.
if we compare even the way we do turns, they are a much softer way of doing the turns. It's a much loose way. And our embrace, please correct me if I'm wrong. I feel the tango, there is a lot of connection on top
Hmm.
and there's more room on the legs for all the movements. In forró, there is a tendency for us to connect to the entire body.
Hmm.
So we dance with our chest together, our heads together, our hips together, and our legs together.
So
So
I
there
would
is a
say, to me, it feels like it could be like blues dancing, but in Brazil style blues dancing.
that's a very good point. I don't know much about blues, but a few people made that comparison because of the proximity.
Yeah, because in blues, there's a lot of contact and it's very relaxed. The way I think of that form, the knees are soft and it's a bit more kind of that use of gravity to connect. Whereas with tango, the frame is a bit higher and it's a little bit off the ground or like levitating a bit more. That's kind of how I think of it. Fajo is danced not in a line of dance, right? It's danced in a slot, meaning like, do you travel in a line of dance or do you dance kind of like in one place?
This is a very interesting topic, and I want to hear from your side how, because I don't know how tango works in the dance floor. In forró is a very organic, which means very fluid and sometimes unorganized dance.
So you bring in some ecstatic dance into it too, huh?
Yes, there is a lot of, if you go to parties, the room is not walking. We are
It's not
not
walking,
going
it's
around.
in
It's
place.
not walking. It's in
Gotcha.
place. But the dance is not that we have like salsa, you have your own line.
Hmm.
It's a little bit, we make it work with the space we have. In the sense, for
Gotcha.
example, I'm here in Brazil now. I'm not in New York. So I went to a bunch of parties here, and sometimes we have parties which are very, very crowded. Or even in New York, if you go, the places we have for hall sometimes are tiny bars.
Hmm.
So you don't have space to do a lot of turns and walk a lot. So you have to be in your own little space and then find the rooms to go here and there. And it's interesting how the challenges of the dance floor also influence the moves we do in the dance floor. There is one move that became traditional in one particular style of forró, which is called trava, which is like a break. And we have a movement which is a walk. So the trava, it evolved as a way to fix a way to fix a walk that could not happen. So it's like we are walking there. Oops, we have to stop because someone's going over there. So it's a dance that you see people trying to find the space and walk around, but not in an organized way that everybody's going the same direction. Does it make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think the thinking behind tango technique is similar, but tango does belong on a what's called a ronda, which is the
Mm-hmm.
line of dance. So it's counterclockwise. So it's a walking dance in its essence where people are walking together. And as it so happens, people will not be walking at the same pace altogether. So when you cannot progress along the line of dance, you have to be able to dance in place. And that's how the vocabulary develops, is with this same idea that you're describing, where it's like,
Interesting.
okay, there's nowhere to go forward. So I need to create circular movements and different types of tricks so that I can continue walking, but I'm walking in the same spot around an axis. So the form of the dance is sort of like inside your body, everything is organized around a spiral. And then you and your partner are spiraling around each other. And then the whole group of dancers, as they're spiraling around each other, are also spiraling around the room. So it's this,
That's so interesting.
expanding spiral. And all of the vocabulary that tango has is sort of in response to that. And I think what's fascinating, what I'm hearing from you about this dance form that's quite young, is that there's a similarity between dance forms and how they evolve. And it's very much kind of the same ingredients. You have music and you have people and you have a limited amount of space. And the dance has to sort of consolidate between what you want to show in the music with who your partner is and how much space you have.
It's interesting you're talking about the spiral. I use different words, but I say that in forró, especially in the style that I dance from my region in Brazil, I say that we orbit around each other.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And so we're always doing this and trying to find space. So if I would try to do like my hand representation here of a couple dancing, we would be in a place, orbiting together, walking here, walking there, walking here, walking there, orbiting again, stop, orbit a little bit to the other side and orbit again, find a space here, let's walk here. And then stay here, blah,
Gotcha.
blah, blah. We find a space here, and we walk over here.
So I think tango dancers would probably lose their minds in that kind of environment, because everything in tango is about the line of dance. You're not
Uh-huh.
allowed to veer out of the line of dance. A lot of the
Wow.
issues around the culture of the social dance is very much emphasis on being very cognizant of people next to you. You can't go opposite the line of dance. You shouldn't like switch lanes. You shouldn't pass dancers. All of that is part of good floor craft that each dancer has to sort of learn.
I don't know how is in tango, but I feel that also the dynamics between the dancers in the dance floor very, very much.
Mm.
In the sense that you have people who are just enjoying being together and listen to music, doing a very simplistic dance, and they're almost just in place, playing with the rhythm, improvising a little bit, and turn here and turn there, and they're same place. And then you have other dancers who like to travel. They like to walk here and then find a space and then change and then walk there and do other things. And you find other places who, similar to salsa, like to turn a lot. So they take space. So they're turning, orbiting around, but they're doing all these flashes using a lot of space. So when you look at the dance floor in Forró, it's a little bit chaotic and
I
organic.
mean, yeah, I kind of have I need to see this for myself. Do you have any videos of a whole party that we could
I can
see?
send you.
Yeah,
I
that would
can
be,
send you
I can link it in the show notes so people would get a sense of like, what is like a wild whole party look like? I want to see that.
for
And
sure.
so
But now I have a question for you. Can I ask a
okay.
question?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're joining the dance floor in tango and you position, you find, okay, I have a space. How do you join the dance floor? How do you find your place in
So
the line?
yeah. So what happens typically when you're entering the dance floor, the etiquette is for the leader to make contact with the leader that they're going to be dancing in front of. So the person coming up, you make eye contact and you wait for that person to nod. And then that's like a permission, like,
Wow.
yes, go ahead and go in. Now, obviously, that doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes people just go in anywhere or they won't wait for that timing. But that's kind of the etiquette. That's what people appreciate, that kind of manner. But that's typically how it's done.
It's so elegant. We
Right.
don't have
It's,
all this
yeah,
courtesy.
there's a lot of that. Tango is very heavy on that. And that's one of the criticisms because it's not just the dance. There's a lot of social etiquette that's very different from any other dance. Like you're not allowed, you're not allowed to ask someone to dance verbally. It has to be done through the practice of the cabeceo, which is this etiquette of locking eyes with somebody across the room. And if that person nods their head, like, so the leader will, look around the room, lock eyes with the potential follower. And if they nod their head, then that means yes. If they look away, that means a no. And then the leader is supposed to walk to meet the follower and walk them to the dance floor and then walk them back after. And you dance a tanda of songs, which is typically it's 4 songs. So it's a four
Wow.
song, either 3 or 4 songs. That's typically the tradition. And so that's about 10 to 12 minutes that you dance with someone. And so there's just a lot of that like pomp and circumstance around the dance that's part of the culture that if you don't know what you're doing or if you come in and you just start asking people to dance verbally, like people are not going to dance with
No.
you. Yeah, it's interesting. And I was going to ask actually, do you guys have any sort of judgment about dancers who are like more flamboyant than other dancers? Is it more like, oh, it's all fun, like everybody has their own thing, or is there like a preference that dancers say this is a better style because it's more friendly, let's say? Is there such a thing?
I mean, I think there is. Usually, if you look, the dynamics of the dance floor you're talking about is very different in Forró. So, for example, usually if you go to parties, you're going to see there's a ten, especially in venues that have events every week and same people come. Usually, you see groups of people in parts of the venue.
I
So
see.
people who like
Okay.
to watch the show, they stay by the front of the stage and they look at the stage so people don't invite them to dance. And then at that moment, and you have sometimes a dance school that usually stays by the bar or whatever. And then this school, they like to do a lot of turns. So you look at this part of the room and you see people doing much more turns.
I
And other
see.
places, you see people dancing much close together and doing full work. So it depends preferences and groups of people.
So you're saying
Um,
that in one event you'll have pockets of people of like-minded dancers gather, and so you end up with like little pockets of different types of musical exploration.
yes,
Gotcha.
I would agree with that. Yes, yes. And people tend to stay in their regions and not walk that much. So
Got it.
it's a very different. Also, the invitation to dance is very different. For me, it's fascinating to hear what you're talking about tango because in one side of my mind, I'm saying this is so elegant. This is so good. Because, for example, I saw some practices in the dance floor which are common that I don't think are very nice. Like a guy barely looking at someone in the eyes and then like kind of almost grabbing the hand of the follower, like, come dance with me.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
would not fly in tango. That is just
yeah,
like absolutely. That's not
yeah.
even on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for example, I think this is a very bad practice. A good practice would be, I would say, if I would recommend on my students or other people to do is either look at the person in exactly what you said and wait for the person to make eye contact and say, hey, I'm interested in have some kind of interaction or to talk before. So
Raphael,
you stand by the side and
ooh,
you chat a little bit.
you could be the pioneer in Forró and introduce the practice of Capaseo. And 100 years from now, people are going to be debating whether Capaseo is a cruel joke or whether it's a very elegant practice. Because that's really a lot of the conversation and difficulty is that practice it's very difficult to do, to look someone in the eye, especially if they're a stranger, to hold the gaze for a couple of beats and then wait for that nod, right? But I was going to ask, so the way it is now, typically what happens if somebody wants to dance? They just come up and they just ask if you want to
Yeah, they
dance.
ask.
It's a verbal. Yeah, it's a verbal
Yeah,
ask.
it's verbal. I mean, all the things happen. I mean, I would say like a good practice would be to look people, but not in that formal way. It's more like I'm walking in the venue. I see you and I saw you dancing before. I say, oh, she's a good dancer. I want to dance with her. And I would like walk towards you. And then maybe I would wait to see if you look at me. And then I would go towards you and then say, hey, do you want to dance? And I would stand
Yeah.
my hand. Or
Yeah.
maybe you didn't look at me, but I would like come side to you and say, hey, I just saw you dancing. You dance like wonderfully. I would love to invite you to dance. Would you dance?
Gotcha.
But I imagine that would be not acceptable in tango, right?
No, no, no. It's really the marker of how seasoned you are as a dancer in a way, socially, is how you do with the cabeceo. Like
Wow.
it's such a marker of your experience. You know, if you go to Buenos Aires, even more so. Like Buenos Aires doesn't even they'll kick you out if you don't practice cabeceo. But what I'm curious about in terms of how the dance works. So it's one song at a time. So you dance one song at a time. Do people dance multiple songs in a row? Does that happen?
There's a very interesting thing because you said you dance 4 songs and usually 12 minutes. In Forró, we have two different scenarios. One scenario is if there is a DJ, is one song at a time, and usually you finish the song and you say thank you, and then you ask someone else, or you invite the same person to dance again. Oh, can want to dance another song or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are also bands that when they play, they link songs together. So they're not
It's like
creating
a
a
full
pause between.
tanda.
Yes,
Yeah.
with no
Yeah.
pause. So the
Wow.
band continues. And some people like, but many people don't like it. The
Aha.
reason being, the reason being, argument is that uh, if you like to dance with someone, it's very easy to, do you want to dance another song? And this will find the other person, oh, flattering, right? This person wants to dance me more with me. This is wonderful. But in other hand, if you start dancing with someone and the dance doesn't match, you're not feeling really good, and you have another 12 minutes to dance and you cannot stop, or in the middle of the dance, they say, hey, sorry, thank you. I'm going to the restroom, or I don't want to dance with you anymore.
It's torture. It's torture. You're talking torture. And again, you're pointing out something that people talk about with tango, the problem that this tanda structure makes dancers very picky automatically. So if you have somebody coming off the street, people don't know you, and maybe you're a beginner, a lot of times the reason why it's so hard for them to get dances is because people don't know you, and it's like going to be 12 minutes, and especially for followers, if I'm a follower and a leader invites me and they're really bad, then for me it's like 12 minutes of excruciating pain perhaps. So people get really protective of themselves and their time. They want to wait to make sure they get like a good tanda. So a lot of times more seasoned dancers will prefer sitting out and just waiting and chatting instead of dancing just for the sake of dancing, you know?
This is another challenge, and one thing that I find I wonder how it works in tango, how welcoming it is for beginners, because it seems a very technical dance with a lot of structure. And like if you're just one, oh, let me try how tango is, or I went to a couple classes and I went to have a good time at a party. How does it
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. I would say Fajo is more friendly for sure than tango. I think any other social dance will have more friendliness towards beginners.
Interesting.
It is very challenging for beginners to penetrate the scene. A lot of times, there's a lot of hoops to jump through that they don't even know are there that have to do with the etiquette. So there's a lot of discussion inside the communities about this, what to do about it, and it's sort of an ongoing challenge. But the best thing to do, I would say, is to think of the social part of it right away. Anybody who's entering into the dance, just to know, like, listen, don't go to Milonga without first getting a primer on what that means, like what's going to happen at the Milonga. Learn the etiquette, just understand that that's part of it. That helps because a lot of people don't realize because they think, oh, I went to salsa, I went to ballroom, I've done this much dancing. It must be the same. And so they go and they think that they'll be okay with just as much as they know of the dance without realizing that they might not even get to dance because they just pissed somebody off because they asked them or, they did something wrong. So it's kind of it's a little
Wow.
bit of a challenge for the tango community. And that's why we struggle a lot with attracting new dancers into the fold, because even at the advanced levels, a lot of dancers from other dance forms get really intimidated by the etiquette and the social dynamics. So for someone who's really experienced, like award-winning, medal-winning swing dancer who thinks that they really know what dancing means, and then they come to tango and their ego just gets shattered because everybody's ignoring them and nobody wants to dance with them. And they're like, it's so hard for them to make that leap. So it makes it very difficult to get people into tango and then to make them stay long enough to where they feel the magic of it, which I always say with tango, the secret is that you got to feel that magic, that spark inside yourself, like when you have that magical tanda with someone where it defies gravity, it defies any sort of understanding. How is it possible that you're connected with someone so deeply and you're rotating in this vortex of energy? And it's mind-blowing. Once you feel that, you're hooked. But until you feel that, it's a little bit of like, why am I going through all this suffering? It doesn't seem like it's worthwhile. So a lot of people, they might try it, but then they leave because it takes a lot of time to get to that magic point.
It seems magical, but very challenging, very
Yeah.
intimidating,
Yeah, right?
as you mentioned.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when did you start dancing forró?
I actually started with Brazilian ballroom when I was a teenager.
Oh, okay.
I had a girlfriend who was a decent dancer. Her parents loved to dance. I used to go every weekend to dance to those ballroom parties. And I was 16. I signed up for a class with her, and I did like about 6 months. And it was a little bit of different dances, a little bit of bolero, a little bit of waltz, a little bit of forró, a little bit of samba. So I learned the basics of all the dances. But for me, it was very formal. The posture was very formal, and culturally was a little bit of an older range of
Mm.
people. So I say, like, I was a 16 years old and I was going to parties with people with 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And for me at the time, it's cool, but I know this is exactly what I want to spend my Saturdays with my girlfriend at the time. Fast forward, I had a friend who was a very good forró dancer, and she took me to a party. And I was hooked because, first of all, I was used to a very more formal frame. And she said, Rafa, no, we can dance close together. We can be really more relaxed. And I was a complete beginner, and she had like, I think, 3 or 4 friends. And then even me not knowing much of the style, all the friends danced with me and said, wow, this is so cool. Like, I know just the basic, but this is fun. And then other people invited me to dance and invited to dance with other people. And said, I need to learn that.
Wow.
And this was my 20s. And when I finished this relationship that I had, I said, hey, where can I learn this dance? How did you? And then she went to place, and they had like a very nice package. And today's terms is like unbelievable. It was like $10, and you could go to all the classes you wanted, and they have 5 classes a week. It
Oh
was
my
like
God.
absurd.
Sign me up.
Yeah, it was,
Wow.
and then when I started, they had like the circles, like with like 5 groups: beginner one, beginner two, intermediate one, intermediate two, and advanced. So
Hmm.
when I started, I was like, hey, I want to go to all the events so I can move to the second circle. And then when I was in the second one, I said, no, now that I'm second level, I want to learn all the moves, so I'm better at parties. Fast forward like about 8 months, I got to the final circle, and I was completely hooked.
So when you're saying the circle, it was like the different levels were in circles with inside the same room. And so
It was
you're progressing through those circles. So you kind of have a like a goal in mind that you're in this circle and you want to be among the other dancers who are dancing something more advanced.
Yes,
That's kind of the
but this was
idea.
like a class environment,
Gotcha.
because the way this school structure, they had like this big room. It was which was where the parties used to happen. It was a big room, and they had like, I don't know, 12 people in this circle, like 20 in this other one, 10 in this other one, and then at the end of a week, you could ask the instructor if he or she feel that you could try the next one, and then be progressing. This is another, you're talking about like the different levels. This is a debate that I have, and I have mixed feelings about levels. When I started, we had the circles, but it was not so rigid. Other
Hmm.
schools are more flexible, and there is one Forró school which is very well known and got very popular, which they are very rigid. They have like exams, and they have like in martial arts they have like red belt or whatever belt.
Wow.
But they have like their little colors with the colors,
Hmm.
and you need to know these movements. You need to be able to execute this and have these skills. Then you have to go to an exam, and then you can go to the next one, the next one, the next one, next one. Which is, it's interesting because they have very good dancers at that school, but at the same time, it creates some kind of hierarchy. And I don't know how this works socially when you're like, we're in the same event, but you are better than me. You're like, we're at a higher level than me. How do we dance together? Like if I'm a leader and like of a higher level dancing with someone a lower level, and then there is a power structure or the other way around, like how can I lead someone who is much better than me? And you,
So
you
you're
know,
saying that you'll have like a color coded something that actually shows other people the level that you're at,
in this
basically,
school, in
in
this
this
school,
school,
especially
right?
because we have this.
And so what would happen at a party is that people would be able to tell who's a beginner and who's advanced
I think, for example, usually, especially the higher levels, they had this collar and they would wear the collars to the party.
because they're like, I'm advanced. I want to show off that I'm
Yes, yeah,
advanced.
exactly.
And beginners won't wear theirs because they don't want anybody to know that they're beginners. But then you can tell that they're beginners because they're not wearing the advanced color. That's pretty hilarious. I think it's funny how ultimately, no matter what you do, what kind of dance, you end up with the same issues because tango has very similar issues, but they're not so structured. We don't have necessarily a clarity between levels that would be marked by anything external. You can be a very advanced dancer and know a lot of vocabulary, but you could be considered a beginner because your technique is really bad and your
Mhm.
posture is really bad.
We have the same problem.
So, yeah, so the problems are actually exactly the same. It's just that they're a little bit even unspoken because, at least for you, you sort of, if you're talking about this school's methods, you're sort of dealing with like, okay, I know that person is considered advanced and I'm considered a beginner and I need to bridge that gap. But a lot of times in tango, it's sort of random because certain people will feel that they're better than other people just by virtue of years that they've been dancing, but they are actually very much beginner. So there's a lot of like ambiguity in levels within the tango scene, and then you will have a lot of tension at tango parties, milongas, where advanced dancers a lot of times will choose to dance with certain people and not others, and then others complain that certain people are being very choosy and they're not dancing with everyone. So there's, it creates the same, I guess, difficulties.
Challenges, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel, I don't know, I just imagine that, especially having a scene where the way things work and you're expected to dance the four songs,
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
complicated. It's complicated because
Yeah.
if I go to a party, I'm totally fine, and I like to dance with people who are starting because I like to in, give them incentive to dance. I like to welcome new people. I want new people in the scene, so I
Right.
dance with everybody. But I would not. I would choose a song, a 3 minute song,
Yeah.
not a 12-minute sequence to dance with someone
Exactly.
who is just starting.
Thank you for validating my tango dancer's anxiety about this, because that's really what everybody has to understand about partner dance in general and any dance that requires a lot of physical contact, because technique matters if you're pressed up against someone for 12 minutes.
And then I have a question for you, because sometimes someone who can be a dancer is attracted to, but is not necessarily an advanced dancer or a very good dancer. But you still want to interact with that person because you are interested in the person, not necessarily on the dance skills. How people balance. Myself, for example, I would rather dance with a very mediocre dancer who is very nice, like good personal hygiene, smelling good, excited about dancing, about the interaction, than dancing with someone who is a very advanced dancer, has a lot of skills in the dance floor, but have that grumpy face, doesn't smile, doesn't look me in the eye, and it's like, I would rather dance with someone I can have like a very nice interaction and like exchange of energy and good vibes, than someone who is very skilled, but who I will not create the same interaction and or be pleasant as a person. I don't know if you see something
Thing
similar.
I think I see probably the exact opposite in tango.
Interesting.
The exact opposite. Yeah. Good energy from a person is icing on the cake,
Uh-huh.
but the technique is going to prevail a lot of times for people, because it's just, unless, there might be an exception to what I'm saying. If you're really good friends with someone, like I have very close friends that might not be great dancers, but I just dance with them because I love them as people, right? There's that. But if I'm like going to a marathon or a festival, um, I'm not looking at the charisma necessarily. I'm looking at posture and I'm looking at technique
Interesting.
first. And then if I dance with them and they happen to be a really great person on top of it, that's awesome. And maybe if they're not, at that point, I can decide and be like, yeah, they're great, the great technique, but maybe I don't really like them as a person. That forms later. And it's much more critical from the perspective of the followers towards the leaders. The followers are more critical of the leaders because they're not in control as they are
Mhm.
following, right? But as a leader, I'm a little bit more lenient because I can decide what goes, right? Like I'm the one who's going to decide how the dance evolves. So I'm a little bit more forgiving of followers with less technique than I am of leaders with less techniques.
But you're talking about the flirting in the scene. I'm curious to hear how you see that in tango.
Well, tango, the image of tango, and I don't know whether this is an image that's specifically a tango image or whether all partner dances ultimately have this dimension to it. And it just happens to be tango has more of it, but this allure of connecting through the dance, and it brings up a lot of feelings for people and a lot of attraction builds up. People have a lot of chemistry. Sometimes the dance becomes very sensual, and a lot of relationships have been born on the dance floor for myself and a lot of people. And there's a lot of drama involved with that, of course. And I've been part of different scenes, both tango and other dances over the years. And I find that to be the case with all dance scenes, that there's always that thing that happens with people fall in love, or there's love triangles, or there's, breakups and fights. Is Forró a dance that has that as well?
I feel there's a difference depending on the scene. For
Mm.
example, I feel in dancing in Brazil is very different than dancing in North America. The scene, the way people interact, and especially in this regard to flirting and relationships, is different.
So would you say in Brazil it's more overt, like you see more of that than in North America?
Yes, but it also has with the culture. For example, in Brazil, it's very common for people to show affection in public. So
Gotcha.
if you go to a party, you see people holding each other arms. You see people kissing in a party. If you go to American party, I'm not even talking about football, but in general, people don't feel so comfortable like kissing in front of other people. You don't see couples like hugging or sitting together or like caressing the head of your partner if you're sitting in a restaurant. In Brazil, it's common for you to be holding your hand, maybe like putting the hand on the hand of your partner, or to be
Hmm.
walking like hugged, is very common in Brazil, not in North America. And I feel that translates to dance. So if you go to a forró party, you're going to see maybe by the middle of the end of the party, a few couples like kissing in a corner or whatever.
Hmm.
In North America, you never see that.
Yeah, you wouldn't see that. Even for tango, I think it's not something that you would see in necessarily in Buenos Aires to that extent. Like I wouldn't necessarily say at a milonga, you'll see somebody making out in the corner. Like that's not going to happen necessarily. But there's definitely a lot more of that energy than in North America. It's definitely much more about this is a dance. We're here to
Yes.
dance, and that people are going to
Yes.
respect that. Now, would you say in Forró, in terms of gender balance, do you have a pretty even split between women and men? And is the leading and following gendered? Like, are the roles as prescribed for women and men the same way that, how we have it in
Interesting.
tango?
I see that there is a tendency of to be more girls than guys. It fluctuates, but I would say in general there's about like 60-40.
You must teach leading and following right away. Like, I mean, you have to learn leading and following right
Yes.
away. Gotcha.
So then I feel that in the past was very much like gender to role, and
Hmm.
now it's still more prevalent that guys will lead, but we're breaking the barriers and everybody is learning. Going back to the particular school with the belts with the colors, they have now for a few years some leaders who went to the last level as a leader and then restarted a follow and then went to the last level as a follower. So
Gotcha.
there is this
Gotcha.
culture of people being able to do both roles and enrolling in both positions.
So, if people want to tap into the biggest scenes in Forró, they would go to New York. And in Brazil, where would it be in Brazil?
Yeah. So I would not say big New York, but it would be a scene that you can have a lot of fun and find like my events usually have the festival 80 people, 100 people being part of the
Gotcha.
event. So it's not big, but it's as a decent size where you can find different levels of dancers and live music and all that. But then if you go to Brazil, the origins are the Northeast,
Hmm.
but I feel the Southeast also embrace very much this tradition. So if you go to Sao Paulo, you're probably going to see the best music. All the good bands, they have the best venues. Sao Paulo has the money, so they pay the good musicians. Also have this tradition, have very good parties with good music. In Belo Horizonte, in Minas Gerais, which is another state in the Southeast, they have very good dance schools. So many great dancers there. There is a village, it's a very small village called Itaunas, became kind of the capital of Forró.
Hmm.
They do the biggest festival in Forró that there is. All the good bands go there in usually July, and they have like 10 days straight, like music 12 hours a day,
Wow.
15 hours a day, parties, endless parties, a lot of
Do
classes
the
and all that
parties
stuff.
last all night? Is it kind of a late night culture? Or what's the typical time
Interesting.
frame for a party?
It depends where. It depends where. But I would say originally and in most places in Brazil, it's a late party. Like party opens at 9 or 10. The band
And then,
starts 11:30, and then it
gotcha.
goes into 2, 3 in the morning, and then you have a DJ until 4.
Gotcha. Gotcha. It's very similar to tango for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if people want to learn more about Fajo, they could just go to your website and you have
Yes.
everything that they need to
Or
learn
or or
about
or
it
or write to me. I'll be happy
or write to
to
you.
yes,
You're
yes.
the official resource. So I will
I
link
try my best.
your I'll link your Instagram handle in the show notes and include your website. Thanks so
Wonderful.
much for coming on the
So happy to be
show.
here. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me.